Hello, everybody. Kelvin Chin here. Great to have everybody on today. Today is Sunday, September 1st, 2024. Wow. Um, and this is going to be the last session in this Living More Happily sessions that I've been doing. I just started doing this as an experiment, to be honest. Um, I, I think in the spring or something. This is the fifth or sixth session. And I'll still do sessions with you guys, but I'm going to stop doing it like every single month kind of a thing, like we've been doing. And if people have any, as I said in the email I sent out to those of you who've registered for this, who are on the list, anybody has any subjects they really want to talk about or whatever, you just send me an email, you send me a text or whatever, and we'll put something together, and then we'll have a kind of uh, discussion like we do now. But we'll kind of do it on a more of a kind of an as needed basis. And you guys know that I do I call it spiritual coaching, spiritual counseling, whatever you want to call it. Basically, individual private sessions. But basically, I cover anything you want to talk about in life. That's what it is. But I take a spiritual meaning what? Meaning a more holistic approach towards looking at whatever the issues are that you're talking about. So I do those private sessions. So that's I'm mentioning that because it's another avenue where you can access me that way and so forth. And you go to my website. I charge for those sessions, but I try to keep it very reasonably priced, and I do it in 30-minute segments because sometimes people don't need that many minutes with me. So I don't want to charge you for a full hour kind of a thing, but if it's not necessary. But a lot of people are doing that hourly. Some people are doing it weekly with me for an hour session, and I'm just helping them um, manage through lots of different types of situations. So it could be relationships, it could be death and dying issues, could be fears about death that they have, or it could just be understanding better about death and dying and what happens after we die and so forth. Or it could just be life issues, some career issues and so forth, and job issues and things that have come up with people's lives. But I call it spiritual because I take, as I said, a holistic approach. I look at I look at the mental, emotional, and the energetic. You want to think of that as a more spiritual kind of way of looking at things. But I don't mean spiritual in terms of religious. That's not what I mean. In terms of religious institution, religious. But I do look at things more from an abstract level. Um, and today's session actually is a perfect example of what I mean when I talk about spiritual, what I mean when I say spiritual. Okay, because today's session, we're going to talk about here together this idea of coexisting opposites and how to find balance in life. Somebody asked me to do a session on this, so um, it was actually one of the people whose idea it was to do these monthly sessions. Um, so I figured it would be perfect, full circle kind of thing, doing my last session talking about what she was requesting. Coexisting opposites. So what does that, first of all, what does that term mean? What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is situations that seem like opposites, seem like they don't go together. They seem like they're opposite, they oppose each other. You know, the word oppose, that's the root word of opposite. So they just kind of they knock heads with each other, basically, is the way I'm kind of using that phrase opposite. Okay. Ideas, situations, people, people. Have you ever knocked heads with somebody in a relationship? Hello. Have you ever been in a relationship? I mean, every relationship has situations where you're knocking heads with each other, right? So that's what I mean when I say opposites or pose. I don't necessarily mean opposites like black and white, you know. Um, I think there's just a lot of gray in life, a lot of gray areas in life, and that includes people, you know. Um, Some people are more bad than good, you could say, but there's no really good or bad, is there? Really? It's more kind of a spectrum. And sure, there are people who are what you might consider 90, 95% unacceptable, and you might consider their behavior as being unacceptable 95% of the time, and you might consider that, oh, that's a bad person, you know. But nobody is like 100% one way or 100% any which way. So that's what I mean when I say there's no real opposites in terms of black and white. But there are situations that oppose each other, that they don't go together, right? And so, and sometimes we're in relationships that don't go together too, right? We talk about that in some of our other sessions. We're going to talk kind of globally today about this idea because the point is, how do we find balance in life? Isn't that what another way, a root way, kind of a foundational way to think about what happiness means? We did our session, the first session we did together here 4 or 5 months ago, 5, 6 months ago, we talked about happiness. And I was talking about happiness more in the way I think of happiness, more in terms of contentment, you know, being inwardly at peace with ourselves and contented. I'm pretty much okay. That's how I would describe being content, right? Contentment. I'm pretty much okay. I'm okay. I'm okay with that, you know? And I mean that in a vernacular way, but in an informal way, but I mean it seriously. Being okay with stuff, meaning what? What I mean by that is meaning not like really, really upset about stuff. Now, certain things will upset us in life. I'm not talking about being a robot. I'm talking about being inwardly at peace, even if something does upset us externally. That's a state of contentment. I'm okay with it. I'm content. It's not pissing me off a lot. It's pissing me off a little bit, but I'm inwardly peaceful. In other words, what does that mean? Inwardly peaceful to me means I'm not overwhelmed by the stuff that pisses me off. I still might get annoyed and upset by something. Again, we're not robots. We get emotionally affected by stuff, especially the stuff, as I said in this other word I was just using a few minutes ago, stuff that opposes us, whether it's a person, a thing, an event, a situation in life, whatever it is. Yeah, we're affected by it, but does it overwhelm us? That's the thing. Does it overshadow who I am? Does it consume me completely? That's not a state of contentment. So those of you who have ever experienced high anxiety and you get consumed by an event or a person or something that happened or a thought or an emotion consumes you, that's not a healthy state to be in, right? That's what I'm talking about, is how can we be more in balance, in a balanced state? A balanced state I'm defining as not being consumed by stuff, still affected by it, but not consumed by it. Two different things, okay? So not robots. We're not turning into robots here. Still human beings. We got feelings, emotions, reactions to stuff, but are we consumed by it, overwhelmed by it? To me, that's the metric. To me, that's the test, okay? The test of balance, if you want to call it. So how do we live in a state of balance more? What's the formula? So basically, there's 3 things that popped into my consciousness when I was thinking about this idea, and we'll talk about them separately. But 3 basic things, and I'm just going to list them, okay? So first of all, if we want to be able to exist in a balanced way in a world, which we do, we live in a world, in a universe. By the way, it's not just on this side, it's on the other side too, it happens. So in a universe where stuff may oppose each other at times, how do we live in that state of balance? 3 things I distilled it down to. Number one, a balance, developing balance between our inner and our outer. Okay, that's point number one. We need to develop a more state of balance. Nobody's ever perfect. So you'll hear me use these relative words like more, better, because nobody ever reaches a state of perfection. That's a spiritual myth that a lot of gurus out there have promoted, and other spiritual religious leaders and so forth. It's wrong. There is no state of perfection. Perfection implies static. Static means not moving, not changing, not ever improving. You've reached a plateau and that's it. Okay? That's what this notion of enlightenment means, is a state of perfection. You've reached the goal and that's it. Well, if that's the case, that means you never improve again. You never improve again. And if, as we've talked about other times in our discussions, we've talked about the idea of eternity. And my logic tells me that we are eternal beings. Our soul is eternal. Kelvin Chin is not eternal. This biological body is going to die at some point. It's going to end. Vonda's is going to end. Ron, Connie, it's going to end. All right? That biological body. But the soul known as Vonda is going to continue, I think. My logic tells me we can't experience eternity, right? But that our soul will continue for eternity. Okay, if that's the case, and you reach a state of perfection, that would be an incredibly boring state to be in for such a long time, right? Because it means you're perfect, you never grow again. You don't grow anymore. And if you hear people talk about enlightenment, oh, perfection, but then you can reach this other state of perfection. That's not perfection. So they jury rig it. You know, they rig it. They what that means, that concept, that phrase, expression means they fake it. They play around with it. This idea of perfection. Well, it's perfection, but you can still grow a little bit more and be even more perfect. You're perfect, and now you can become this other level of perfect. That makes no sense. Okay, which goes to the next point in terms of balancing and living in with coexisting opposing ideas, is this idea of cognitive dissonance. All right? So the first point is balance between the inner and the outer. And the second point is getting rid of cognitive dissonance, seeing where cognitive dissonance exists, and I'll tell you what I mean by that if you don't know the term, and getting rid of it. Cognitive dissonance, what does that term mean? Well, let me give you the third thing. And the third thing is applying free will. So those are the three things. So we'll come back and let's revisit cognitive dissonance a little bit more. We'll talk about balance, about inner and outer even more too. But so the three things I'll just repeat. Balance between the inner and the outer. Second one is cognitive dissonance, getting rid of it. And the third point is applying free will. All right, those are the three things. Those, to me, those are the core elements for anyone to live a balanced life, where there's this coexist, where we can live in the universe, which we do, where there are opposing ideas and people and so forth and so on. And that's what I mean when I say opposites. I don't mean opposites meaning black and white, good and bad, you know, all one way, all the other way. No, there's a spectrum, okay? So let's talk about this cognitive dissonance a little bit more. We'll talk about free will, and we'll come back and talk about balance a little bit more too. So cognitive dissonance, what does that term mean, first of all? Cognitive means thinking. Cognition is a word that means thinking. So cognitive has to do with thinking. And the word dissonance, D-I-S-S-O-N-A-N-C-E, dissonance means inconsistency. Inconsistency, not consistent stuff, okay? And I just gave you one a few minutes ago where you'll hear, and there are many, many spiritual groups out there, And you'll hear many, many gurus and spiritual teachers, and they may not call themselves a guru. They may even say, they may even tell you that I'm not a guru, and then they act like a guru and they tell you know, whatever. They want you to believe what they are saying. And what have I told you guys in at least 100 times I've told you. I was going to say 1,000,000. It's probably not 1,000,000, but it's probably literally 100 times I've told you guys in my classes, I am not a guru, I am a teacher. I don't want you to blindly follow what I say. I want you to think about what I'm saying and take what makes sense and shelve the rest. Put the rest on a shelf and just maybe you just leave it there forever. Or maybe you take it off and you'll dust the idea off, you dust it off, figuratively speaking. You kind of think about it again, in other words, 6 months later, a year later, or whatever. You think, oh, now that Kelvin said that a year ago, oh, now it kind of makes sense to me. Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe it doesn't. And you don't follow the idea that I'm throwing out at you because you don't think it makes sense to you. That's where the rubber meets the road. Every student of mine, I encourage you to think on your own. Because if you think on your own, if I can help you figure out how to think better on your own, I've done my job as a teacher. That's my responsibility, is to try to help my students think a little bit more clearly about stuff. I want you guys to be self-sufficient, independent, because we all are, in fact, anyway. Even though you think, oh, I'm part of this group and that group. Yeah, okay, that's fine. Socially, you may be. But independent, we're all independent souls. So back to this cognitive dissonance idea, this perfect thing that I just told you about. There's a lot of gurus out there that talk about enlightenment and reaching a state of enlightenment. Spiritual teachers talking about reaching the state of perfection and whatever. But they don't realize, first of all, that they're making the soul either not eternal, or they're making the soul live in a state of incredible boredom for eternity after they reach enlightenment. It's ridiculous. If you think about it, there's cognitive dissonance in all kinds of situations and scenarios. It's not just in spirituality. But that's a classic one, because I can't tell you how many conferences I've been to. I hear people talk and say, oh, we're so divine, we're perfect already. Or, people will say that they're perfect already. What does that mean? What does that mean? What does that even mean? Perfect means no mistakes. People use this word perfect very, very loosely. They might mean it means, oh, well, I think of it as meaning beautiful. Okay, well then use the word beautiful. Don't use the word perfect. People misuse language all the time, and the problem with that is that language has meaning, and meaning has an effect on our consciousness and our emotions and our belief systems and therefore our thoughts and our actions, and therefore our lives. And so if we use language, whether it's English, Swedish, Russian, French, doesn't matter which language, Chinese, whatever the language is, if you're using it incorrectly, if you're using words that are incorrect words in the context in which you're talking, you're leading your mind down roads that don't go anywhere, or dead end, or they take you to the wrong place. And that creates suffering. So the notion that, oh, we're all perfect already, or we reach a state of perfection, it's wrong. Okay? Perfect means no more growth. No more growth after you become perfect. You cannot become perfect and then improve yourself. Perfect means no more improvement needed. That's what it means in English. All right? And there are other words for perfect in other languages and so forth, but people misuse them all the time. And it's important. It's important to use language because it's teaching us. We are our own teachers, and we are teaching ourselves. Whether we realize it or not, we are. We're teaching ourselves by how clearly we think about stuff. And cognitive dissonance is something we got to get rid of if we really want to be balanced. Because you're gonna feel like you're gonna get thrown around like a football if you're thinking this, and thinking this way actually takes you down a road that you don't want to go down. And yet you're going down it and you don't even know it. That's how unclear most people's thinking is. So there's this kind of thing in spirituality also, which is really wrong. I'll just make that direct, strong statement about it, that thinking about ideas is not spiritual. That spirituality is about feeling, about how you feel about something. That it's all intuitional. So I'm a big believer in intuition, and I'm a big believer in feeling, but I'm a big believer in balance and a holistic view of life. And so what that means is feeling is important, but thinking is equally important. And when I say thinking, sometimes you could think of feeling as thinking also. If you really want to be very, very holistic, feeling is a form of thinking, okay? And I sometimes look at it that way too. That's how I personally look at feeling. It's all inclusive. Intuition is part of my thinking. But a lot of spiritual people don't look at it that way. They bifurcate, they separate. They say, well, there's feelings and there's thinking. And what they mean by it, thinking is analyzing stuff. Okay. My experience that reaches back consciously, memory-wise for me, 6,000 years, is that the more fine-tuned, the better, the clearer my thinking has been, the less dissonant, the less cognitively dissonant, the less inconsistent, the more consistent, let's say it positively, the more consistent my thinking has been, the clearer my thinking has been, the better my feelings have been, my emotions have been more balanced in my lifetimes over the 6,000 years. And so, to me, they go hand in hand. The analysis of thought and thinking and our feelings and our intuitions. They go hand in hand. They are not opposing. So many people in the spiritual communities think of them as opposing. It's a mistake, mistake, mistake. They don't even think and realize and reflect that they're always analyzing. That's what they're doing. But what they do sometimes realize and are aware of is that sometimes their thinking is faulty. That's what cognitive dissonance is. But you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, you clean the baby, right? You clean the baby. If your thinking is faulty, you don't throw out analysis. You improve your analysis. Just because your analysis makes mistakes sometimes, it doesn't mean that you don't think anymore. And I've seen this. I had a friend in graduate school actually who went that road. Very, very bright. Then we were both then young men at Yale graduate school. You guys know I went to graduate school at Yale. So a very, very bright young man then, who's now my age, like a year or two older than I am, I think. And he decided when he was in his young mid-20s that was it. He was not going to analyze anymore. It's a travesty. That said, remove the cognitive dissonance. That helps with our balance, okay? But that said, that was his free will choice to do that. And I still respect and love him, even though I don't agree with his choice. That was his choice to say, I'm not going to analyze things anymore. I'm just going to blindly follow what somebody tells me. right? And that's what he did. He went down the blind following road for the rest of his life, 50 years. Well, he's still alive now, but for the last 50 years. I'm like, really? Okay. And how's that been for you happiness wise? Well, I don't know. That's a very subjective thing. It's not my life to live, right? So it's his life, it's his choice. But this is the third point. Application of free will. Free will means what? Free will means personal choice. Just to be crystal clear on this, because some people in the audience who may be listening to this recording later or whatever may have read stuff about free will in some philosophy book or some religious article written by some religious leader or something, and they'll sometimes use the word free will to mean moral authority, like who has the authority to say what's right and what's wrong, who has the authority morally to say what's good and bad and ethical and unethical. So I'm not talking about that. I'm not using the words free will in that way. So if anybody is thinking, whoa, blah 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 about free will in that way, no. I'm using it very simply as meaning personal choice. Do you have the choice to say yes or no to something, anything in life? My experience is that we each do. Each of us, each soul in the universe, not just on planet Earth, not just on this side, the other side too, the afterlife. Every soul has the ability to say yes or no. Okay? You don't lose that ability. To me, that's an inherent it's inherent ability, an inherent trait, an inherent characteristic of a soul, of a mind, a consciousness. When I say soul, this idea, this eternal aspect of ourselves, whatever you want to call that. Okay. So that, to me, we always have personal choice to say yes or no to something, to anything, to choose in that way. That's what I'm using. That's how I'm using the phrase free will. Okay. So we all have free will. And if we all have free will, that means we don't all agree on everything all the time. This goes back to the topic we're talking about today, right? This coexistence of opposing ideas, how to find balance in life with it. We got to accept the fact that other people are going to disagree with us. They are. And that's it. Period. Easy to say, not so easy to practice. I get it. But that's the thing. Everybody has their free will choices, and they may not agree with us all the time. And we need to get comfortable and okay with that. Now, when I talk about this idea, sometimes you may have heard me use this phrase, that we live in a universe where that is actually, it's an eternal democracy, really. It's not we're creating an eternal democracy. It already exists. But people haven't caught on to the fact that that's the way the universe is. It's an eternal, never ends. That's my logic tells me that. Again, we cannot experience eternity. We can experience a feeling of timelessness or expansion of our time where it seems like it's not measured in the same way we measure it on a daily basis on planet Earth. But time is still existing, right? It's just existing differently, seems faster or slower, whatever. Democracy meaning what? Choice, freedom of choice, okay, free will. I think that we live inherently in a universe that is an eternal democracy, if you want to think about it in those terms. But the problem is, I think most people don't realize, number one, that that's the case. And if they do start to get their minds around that concept of eternal democracy, eternity, and free will choices that people make, they don't like it. So they resist it. And what does resistance of reality do? That creates unhappiness. It creates frustration. You get frustrated. It's like, hey, I tried to make them do that, but they wouldn't listen to me. And you get frustrated. And if you really get pushy, then you get angry, right? Because you're not accepting the reality of what? They're, in this case, the reality of the fact that they can make their own choices, other people in the universe, not just here on planet Earth, but let's just keep focused on planet Earth because that's where we are. We got 8 billion of us here. It's enough of a problem to talk about. So yeah, we have to accept the fact that other people are making free will choices. Now, can we do things socially to improve the well-being, let's say, the functionality of humankind? Yes, we can. We can create social structures, etc. We can have laws and regulations to help, keep people within the certain kind of guardrails of the social structure that we want to have, like no murdering, no stealing from people, kind of basic things. So when I say eternal democracy, I'm not just saying free for all, but I'm saying from a spiritual, in terms of functioning of the world. But from a spiritual standpoint, we need to wrap our minds around these concepts. Otherwise, we're going to be eternally unhappy, which is not what I'm hoping for all of us, all of you, all of my students, right? I'm hoping I can help you each get to a place where you're more or less, again, nothing is perfect all the time, but more or less happy pretty much most of the time. That's, I think most people would take that, right? Well, I'm happy like 99% of the time. Yeah, maybe not 100% of the time, but 95% of the time, I'm happy. I'm at peace. I'm inwardly content. I think most people would accept that as a great life, right? And so that's what I'm trying to help my students, all of you, get to, is that place. And so back again to these concepts: balance between inner and outer, getting rid of cognitive dissonance, and accepting and applying this notion of free will, but really accepting the notion and this concept of free will in our daily lives, right? That there's certain things we can influence. There's nothing wrong with influencing and educating. That's what I do, right? I'm a teacher. So I influence and educate, but I don't have an expectation that all of you are going to blindly follow what I say, because I know that each of you has free will, right? That's an acceptance. That's an example of what I mean when I say an acceptance of the free will that every eternal soul has. So, so it doesn't mean don't communicate. It doesn't mean don't share your ideas. It doesn't mean don't try to influence other people's thinking and get and share ideas with them. Educate maybe a little bit. Yeah, you know what I mean by educate, but I don't mean educate like pushing ideas and making you think the way I'm thinking. That's not what I mean educate. So sharing ideas, it's important. It's good, but always with the kind of the understanding and the feeling within oneself that I respect Vonda. She has her own thoughts about things. Maybe what I'm saying resonates. Maybe 80% of it does. Maybe 20%. Maybe 5% of it resonates. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me. What matters is what Vonda does with it. That's between her and herself. That's a private conversation. That's a very personal, intimate relationship that Vonda has with herself. I don't interfere with that relationship. I cannot. It's inappropriate for me to interfere. What do I mean by interfere in the relationship that Vonda has with herself? Interfering would be like Vonda, you got to think this way. What are you thinking? You got to, to me, I would be interfering to to act that way and to speak that way to Vonda. That's disrespectful, okay, to Vonda. Vonda's got to figure it out. I can share ideas with her, but she's got to figure it out herself. And it's disrespectful. Why? It would be disrespectful of me to talk to her that way because I'm not respecting her ability to figure things out herself. And I'm not respecting the fact that she may have a different take on a certain idea than I do. She may have a better take that actually is less cognitively dissonant than mine. I try to clear out my, any of this kind of dissonant, inconsistent thinking, but that doesn't mean that I've perfectly done it on everything that I've thought about. So that's why this give and take and this sharing and communicating, I think, is important, because my sharing with Vonda can also help me too. It's not just the teacher gets more. You don't have to look at yourself as a teacher all the time, but I am a teacher, and but that doesn't mean I don't learn from my students too. Also, it's a two-way street. So, back to this idea of balance between the inner and the outer. So those of you who've taken my meditation class, that's the missing link for most people. The missing link is to turn within, to develop that balance between the inside of ourselves and the outside, knowing thyself, knowing more about who we are as an individual. Now, and when I say, I'm picking on you, Vonda, because I can see you here, but Vonda is different from Kelvin. They have different souls, they have different personalities, they have different likes and dislikes and everything. They think differently. We need to respect that in other people. But as individuals, we need to connect. Vonda needs to connect with Vonda within herself. Kelvin needs to connect with that larger sense of Kelvin within himself, right? That's what I call the inner. And by connecting within ourselves through, for example, meditation, the way I teach it is very easy and effortless, as those of you know who've taken the class. What does that do? That connects us with our larger sense of self. It's still me, but it's not the me that's making the decisions of what words to use in this talk that I'm doing with you right now on Zoom. No, it's that larger sense of me that's more abstract, you could say, less concrete, but still thinking specific stuff, but in a more free-flowing, and when I say abstract, even in a more, a less discrete way, a more expanded way. So it's when you start to have these experiences of that part of your mind way outside what I sometimes refer to as the 8-inch plastic bucket part of our mind, the analogy I've borrowed for decades from that psychology professor, getting out of that 8-inch bucket, the 16-centimeter bucket part of our mind, that is us. But it's a more abstract, it's less concrete, therefore our experiences, for those of you who know have had the experience of getting out of the bucket, part of the mind, that it's sometimes, you have this odd visual, you have this kind of abstract or less concrete, energetic feeling. You feel this expansion that you don't normally feel when you're making your eggs in the morning, very specifically making your scrambled eggs in the morning in your kitchen. That when that starts to happen, that expansion of oneself in the terms of connecting with one's larger sense of self, which is still us, it's our own mind. When that starts to happen, that creates more balance. That's the fundamental foundation, balance between the inner and the outer world that we live in when we open our eyes up, right? That's key. And that's a key element to experiencing and finding balance in life amidst all this coexisting opposite stuff, opposing experiences and opposing ideas. Okay? That's the thing. And it's a missing link because most people are sitting around thinking about stuff. And if you're just sitting, and so why do I say it's a missing link, this turning within process that I call turning within meditation? Why is it a missing link? It's a missing link because in this context, if you're just sitting around thinking about stuff and even thinking about great principles and really healthy and helpful concepts like we're talking about today, if you're just sitting around and we're talking and you're going to workshops and this and that and attending workshops, which is great, there's nothing wrong with it. But if you're only doing that and you're not consistently every day, a couple times a day, turning within and connecting with one's larger sense of self, then you're still using that little 8-inch bucket part of your mind to cram more ideas into, instead of expanding your conscious capacity of your mind to be much, much bigger than what that psychology professor many decades ago called the 8-inch bucket part of the mind. Doesn't it make more sense? This is why I say it's the missing link. The turning within meditation is a missing link. Well, doesn't it make more sense to expand the container and at the same time add more stuff to the container, more content, more thinking, more ideas, like we're talking about today? To me, that makes more sense. To me, that's what I mean when I say it's a missing link. If we don't expand our conscious capacity of our mind, then we're just cramming more junk into it. So there's nothing wrong with adding more stuff and adding more ideas and thinking about the relationship between this idea and that idea. But when you start thinking about the relationship between this idea and that idea, you've just added a third idea. Okay, now it's the relationship idea. And then if you think about the relationship between those amongst those 2 or 3 ideas with another 3 or 4 ideas over here, now you got 3 or 4 or 5, 6 relationships. Now I don't know what the math is, but you're up to 16 or 20 relationships. I mean, 16 or 20 ideas. You go exponentially adding more stuff to this same small container of your mind. That's why I say the turning within meditation, point number 1 on my list, the balance between the inner and the outer, is to turn within regularly, because then you're expanding the conscious capacity. And then when you're trying to get rid of the point number 2, which is the cognitive dissonance stuff, you're more effective at it. And then number 3, if you're back to this missing link idea, if you're then turning within, so it's not missing link anymore, you're actually linking properly, effectively. When I say properly, effectively linking by turning within, then number 3 starts to take care of itself in the following way, because when you feel more relaxed inside, more connected, more foundationally confident within yourself, don't you find that you're less pushy with other people? I do. I have found that over my 6,000 of years of experiences, of lifetimes, that through all those lifetimes over the last 6,000 years that I have memories of, all those experiences, I've found that the more chill I am, the more balanced, the more connected I am within myself, and therefore the more relaxed I am functionally, the easier it is for me to accept the free will choices of other people and not be pushy. So to me, again, that's what I mean when I say I think a really fundamental missing link is the meditation, the turning within meditation. Really crucial. And so for those of you who've taken my class on meditation, yeah, keep it up. Keep it up. Don't stop. Consistency twice a day. And those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, check out kelvinchin.org or go to turningwithin.org, my meditation website, and check it out. You'll see it's very, very different, very easy to do 10, 15, 20 minutes twice a day, each time. You know, simple, easy, no clearing the mind of thoughts, no focusing on anything, no concentrating. No. So no focusing on the breath. It's not the same as mindfulness and all that stuff, okay? So let's open up to questions. Questions. Anything? Comments about what we said today in our session? Does it make sense? Go ahead. Yeah, Vonda, yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You said something that really struck me.
Yeah.
At the start, you said, and I'm just paraphrasing, conflicted relationships are here in this earth and on the other side. I thought I heard you say.
Well, what I meant by that, what I was saying is that there can be relationships, ideas, concepts, whatever, on the other side, just like there are on this side, that conflict, that oppose each other. Because why? Because every mind is unique. And we don't lose our mind, our individual mind ability to think different thoughts from other minds. We don't lose that ability on the other side. In other words, you don't die and then all of a sudden everybody is thinking the same. Everybody's thinking the exact same way after you die. Some people think that. It's not the way it works. Your mind is your mind and you keep it. Okay? That's what I meant. Go ahead.
So for me, I've been in misunderstanding. I had this different idea about what it's like on the other side. And I realize it relates to my daughter who's on the other side. So I just assume that it's on the other side, even though those spirits are working to grow, whatever happens. I saw it as kind of a beautiful, easy place. So I've been in misunderstanding
No.
what it can be on the other side.
Well, no, I think it is a beautiful, easy place. That's not inconsistent with that idea. So I think it is a beautiful, easy place for a number of reasons. Why? That's my experience, because you know, Vonda, that I've had many experiences on the
Yes.
other side. And so my experience, it is a beautiful, easy place. And it's a beautiful, easy place because you don't have to work. There's no such thing as money. Exactly. You don't have to work, Connie. You don't have to work. You don't have the roof over your head. You don't have a biological body anymore. You don't have to worry about getting sick. So, biological body getting sick. It's like you don't have the stuff that we have to worry about here. You don't have that on the other side. Okay. So is it easier? Absolutely. Is it beautiful? Yeah, because you think, and you create. It's difficult to describe to people because we don't normally think of ourselves here as doing it that way. Because whatever you think here, can you think stuff into creation? You could kind of figuratively say that here, but it's literally on the other side. I mean, here you could say, well, I thought that building into creation because I got the financing together, I got the architect, I had met with the architect 20 times, and this is what I want it to look like, and yada yada yada. So yeah, you could say that you thought that into creation, but it takes a longer time than the other side. It's just like that. But so the idea that it's a beautiful place on the other side, Vonda, that's not inconsistent with the fact that people can still think different ideas. And they may still think they're ideas that you don't agree with. And so that's what I'm teaching you guys. Also, why, again, you guys know that I don't make people believe what I believe about afterlife. So there's some people maybe watching this, they don't even believe in an afterlife. That's okay. There's no problem. But I'm just answering the question as asked, based on my experience. But I'm not here to change people's belief, whether they believe in an afterlife or not, doesn't matter. But the point, though, here, Vonda, is that do we take our minds with us? Yes. Does a person who is confused take a confused mind with them to the other side? Yes. Can some of that confusion go away and things get clarified after they die? Yes, that's possible too. But is it also possible that some of the confusion can stay? Yes, the point is that anything is possible because we're talking about the mind and so forth. And even if somebody, let's say a being on the other side, a dead loved one or who knows whatever being, doesn't matter who it is, tries to educate that person after they die about their confusion, about thinking about this or thinking about that or whatever the thoughts are about. Does the person have to listen to them? No, that's free will. That's the whole point of free will. So that's what I'm saying. You can't predict about how this is going to be and what's this person going to think and this and that and the other thing. I'm just preparing you guys so you know that your mind is going to continue and you can choose whatever you want to choose on the other side too. And if somebody comes knocking on your proverbial door on the other side, Vonda, you have to join this group. No, you don't. You can, if you want to. Just like people knock on your door here on this side. You got to join this group. No, this because for this reason and that reason. You decide. Same thing on the other side. But it's a beautiful place. Yeah, it's easy. Easy. It's like vacation. It's like a vacation mode place. But people, if we're going to talk a little about this more, it's like on the other side, it's very, it's like people hang out in groups on the other side, just like they do on this side. But it's almost like more so on the other side because it's so much easier. You don't have to get in a plane. You don't have to get in a car. You don't have a biological body. You're a mind. You're a consciousness. It's very difficult, I know, for a lot of people to wrap their minds around this, what it's like on the other side, because we think of this body so much as a vehicle, but we don't need the vehicle for the mind to continue to exist. And so there's a lot of different groups, and you end up hanging out with the groups of people you tend to resonate with, and that's why it tends to feel like vacation. It's like you're hanging out with all your best friends. Now, can you go to other groups? And yeah, nobody's making you stay here or there, but I mean, what do you think most people are going to choose to do because of free will? They're going to choose to be in a group where they feel loved and appreciated and where it's easy. So people tend to hang in these different groups on the other side. Big groups, small groups, medium-sized groups, and so forth, Yeah, Connie.
Yeah, I have a question about what about animals? Do we see our pets on the other side?
Yeah. I've seen my pets. Yes.
Yeah, I feel like my cat Savannah the one who passed away like 6 years ago, she's still here because my other cats are playing with something that I can't see.
Yeah. Yeah, no, they
Yeah.
hang around. They hang around on this side, the other side, and so forth. Yeah, no, look, any being, every being has a soul.
Right.
Every being has a soul. I don't think my experience is my yoga mat over there in the corner does not have a soul. Okay, my yoga mat is not a conscious mind. That's but does an animal have a conscious mind? Yes.
Okay.
So do they have a soul in the way that we're talking about that's eternal? Yes. Does that yoga mat over there have, does my inversion table that I hang upside down on have a soul? No, it's a bunch of material that's put together into a thing that you flip upside down. Does my TV have a soul? No, it doesn't have a, no,
Yeah.
it doesn't make conscious decisions, is how I think of a soul, a being that has a soul. Okay. Does a bird have a soul? Yeah, I think they do. All right. And people may say, well, but yeah, they can't make a building. They can't build a. That's not the metric. That's not the metric that I look at. You know, look at most of the 8 billion humans cannot make a building. so, so they. So that doesn't mean that you got to be able to make a building in order to say that the person has a soul or whatever. No, some people think about souls that way, and it's very, very primitive. Let's just say. Go ahead, Rhonda. Did you raise your hand?
Yeah, I hope I'm not saying too much, but I was told after my daughter passed in a scuba diving accident
Oh
that
wow.
when she met the angels, he didn't want to go.
Yeah,
She didn't believe she was dead.
yeah.
And it took them some time to convince her, come on, and follow them. And then it was said, after she will be there for a long, long time, and she will be there when I am there. And I expect that I will live another 20, 25 years. And that just, I've never been impacted with that until today with your subject.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, it's beautiful, Wanda. Yeah,
And I got that 8 years ago.
you heard that 8 years ago. Yeah, yeah. Well, something opened up in you, for you to be impacted, to use your word, by that. You were told 8 years ago. Yeah. Oh, scuba diving. I used to scuba dive a lot. A
Yeah,
lot.
it was in Cozumel.
Cozumel. I've dived there.
Yeah.
Wow. She was in a rip. There's a lot of rips there. A lot of rip currents.
Yeah. Well, the day that she was scuba diving, it was they were short on the boat. You're supposed to have either a dive master or a dive buddy with you. Well, they didn't. And so she went down to the reef, whatever, did her thing. And then she came up to, they brought her up to 15 feet. And when they came back, yeah, I assumed, knowing, she said, oh, go ahead, I'll just wait right here. And so when he came back, I assumed he thought, okay, she's gone up to the boat. A doctor came around the corner of the reef and she saw this person and then she realized there was no bubbles. And that's when rescue started. I listened to it on Scuba Board. And so anyway, they just said drowning. You don't get that kind of information because they're not going to do anything that will cause them to get sued or anything like that,
Yeah. Yeah. So who knows what really happened? Wow. So she might have had an equipment failure or whatever, but she did not have a buddy with her?
No, they were short on the boat that day.
You always have a buddy. If you don't, if you have short on the boat, doesn't matter, then you have a triplet.
Yes,
If there's not enough people to have buddy duets, then you have a triplet.
yes, I
So
understand.
so that I'm so sorry to hear that. I've done about 50 dives. 50,
Wow.
a lot of dives. I did a lot of dives back in the 80s and 90s before my kids were born. And then I was just kind of focusing on being a dad, not because, takes a lot of time. You go out in the boat, this and that, you're gone for hours and hours. So I was just focusing on being a dad.
Yeah. You
And
know,
but yeah, what's that, Connie?
I was gonna say scuba diving class was the only class I failed at FIT. I went to Florida Institute of Technology.
Failed it? Yeah,
And
yeah,
I failed that class because I left my buddy at the bottom because my ears were bothering me. I was like, goodbye. And
yeah.
they said, you failed.
You never leave your buddy. You never leave
Right.
your buddy. Because sometimes you may be sharing
Yeah.
if you have an equipment failure, you teach how to buddy breathe. You're breathing on off the same regulator. Wow,
Mhm.
I'm so sorry to hear that, Vonda.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's
It's just life.
but well, I've heard that especially in Mexico, but other parts of the world, I'm sure too, but especially in Mexico, the attention to safety by the dive companies is not that it's not consistent, and it's about the money and so forth and so on, which is sad. Um, Oh wow. Oh God. Anyway, yeah, I had great experiences diving, but I was always cautious. I'm respectful of the ocean. It's powerful. And yeah, no, I always went on I dived in Honduras. I've dived all over the world. Um, wow. So back to your daughter in terms of other side. Yeah, she can choose to wait for you. Any of our loved ones can choose to wait for us. They could choose to come back too. Look, I have friends I have a good friend of mine, his grandfather came back. He's convinced that it's his grandfather who is one of his closest friends. Now, yeah, I mean, he knew his grandfather and can't remember the age difference between him and his friend, but whatever it is, it all makes sense. The years make sense. The birth, the death of his grandfather, the birth of his friend, et cetera, et cetera. And he remembers his grandfather's personality, and it's the same personality. And he was very close to his grandfather before he died, obviously. So that can happen too. So, but yeah, she could wait. She could wait. She could wait for you. That's probably more often than not what most people are going to do. They're going to wait. You know,
I
yeah.
read the story once, and um, and I don't remember where I read it. It was a long time ago, and I think it was right after I had been ill or something. So I don't recall the information, but this man was walking along the road, and he he was beat up by these robbers and different things. And the story went as later he determined one of the robbers, or one of the people was his ex-wife, one was his father. It was all these other kinds of people in other lives. Do you believe that's possible?
Oh, it's definitely possible. That's a weird story, though, for that they would beat him up. That must have been a really dysfunctional relationship in another lifetime for that to happen in the current lifetime of whoever that was. But yeah, absolutely. You've read my book, right? It's in the other room. But my third book, right? With the orange cover.
No, I've only read the one with the purple cover. I've got to get the
Oh,
rest.
oh, you should read the one with the orange cover. Um, it After the Afterlife, it's called. I tell stories in there. You know, my son and my daughter, where we've been in other relationships, other lifetimes, and had relationships as father, son, as brother, sister, in other lifetimes, as also as father, daughter, and yeah, different relationships in different lifetimes. And we
I have to
independent.
read that book.
Yeah, and we have independently recovered some of these memories, independent. Yeah, independent from each other, in other words. Yeah. Yeah, I tell some stories in there. You should check that out, my orange book, After the Afterlife.
This is really a fruitful subject.
Good, good,
I'm enjoying it so much.
good, good. Any other comments, questions before we call it a session? Anything?
I don't think so. No.
No, good. Ron, anything? No. John? Good. All right, you guys. Well, good to see everybody. Always really good to see you guys. Thank you for your interaction, questions, comments, and everything. It always adds a lot. And we'll see you next time we do this. As I said, you know, you want a topic, you get a topic you want to talk about, just shoot me an email. We'll put it out there and so forth. Okay.
Okay, and then we have meditation next weekend or
Oh,
the
yeah.
weekend?
So, yeah, thank you for reminding me. So we have a meditation. For those of you who've taken the class, I have, it's full. The class is full now, next weekend. But those of you who've already taken the class, you can sit in on, as you know, lifetime follow-up. So you can sit in on Saturday and Sunday class. It's at the same time, 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. on the East Coast and so forth. And you figure out the time zone stuff. But also, and in an October class, I have an October and November and a December class. I teach the meditation once a month in a group. And then I do private classes, like I have a private class I got to do right now with somebody in the UK over in London, England. So I do private classes too, but I do a monthly group class in a small group, 5-6 people. And day one is always private, as you know, one-on-one. And then day 2, 3, and 4 can either be in a small group or can be private, like with this guy I'm teaching today. The other thing is my Afterlife series. I got the Afterlife series coming up starting September 29th. And I'm only going to do it maybe a couple times a year. So I may not do another one till I'm not sure when in 2025. Am I going to do it in the spring? Am I going to do it in the next summer or whatever? So September this month. Today first. So 29th, Sunday at 10 in the morning Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time. What's that? 6 p.m. in the UK and so forth. 6-part series every other weekend. So for 12 weeks, but 6 sessions, every other week, every other Sunday. And I'm going to talk about afterlife and reincarnation experiences and the idea. Now, one thing that I'm going to do differently for those of you who've taken this class already, then you'll see there's a discounted rate for, I call it alumni, people who've already taken the class. Just go on my kelvinchindar.org website and go to the Afterlife and Reincarnation series page, and you'll see how to register for those of you who want to register. But one thing I'm doing differently is I'm suggesting strongly that everybody read my 3rd book, After the Afterlife, the orange covered, the one with the orange cover. After the Afterlife, read the book before September 29th, before we start the series, because I'm going to talk about afterlife stuff in a little bit of a different way this time, referencing that book so that I can stay more focused, talking about some of the teaching lessons that we can all draw from those types of experiences. So I'm going to spend less time talking about my personal experience and talking, and I'll have to talk about it somewhat, of course, but when I want to spend more time in this time teaching this series, more time on talking about the lessons we can learn from different experiences that we've had and so forth. So I'll have to reference the experiences somewhat, but I'm not going to dive into them as deeply as I do in the book. So you should read the book first, and then it'll make sense because I'm going to refer to this and this and this. I'm going to teach it a little bit differently this time. You'll see. This is the 18th time that I'm teaching this 6-part series. So I've been teaching it for like 6 years now. So yeah, and you don't have to have taken any of my other classes before, whatever. People who are watching the recording, you know, anybody can join us for this 6-part Afterlife and Reincarnation series on September 29th. Okay, good.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Guys, great. Thanks for mentioning that, Connie. You reminded me.
Okay. I'll
All
see you
right.
next weekend.
All right. I'll see you next
All
week.
right.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. See you guys.